Hello and welcome to today's Wednesday Words with me, Victoria Reynoldson, communication and culture coach. And today we're going to be talking about diplomatic communication. There is a problem. There are times when we need to communicate bad news, negative messages, information which is perhaps what the other person or people don't want to hear. And there are times when we can communicate that in a very direct way. We are open, we share it, we find a solution, and we move on. But there are other times when actually it's more challenging to do this. Perhaps we need to have more a diplomatic communication approach and use softened language. And this could be for a number of different reasons. Perhaps it's about the relationship. Perhaps you don't know the other people very well. And actually that relationship is incredibly important, for example, with external people, such as customers. Perhaps it's because it's the context. It's a negotiation or a meeting, which is really important with high stakes. I'm sure you recognize there are many situations where we don't want to be so direct. We may have to tread carefully to share the problems and the bad news. In some cultures, this style of diplomatic, softened communication, you can find it more often. So, for example, in the UK, where I'm based, in British culture, actually, it comes up quite often in tricky situations. And this is because it comes from the belief in the UK that when you're criticizing people's work, their ideas, what they've developed, actually, this can be seen as something personal. Actually, you're criticizing the person. So this style of diplomatic and softened language is often used, for example, in disagreeing style. However, saying that, you probably wouldn't want to communicate like this all the time, no matter what the situation, context, or relationship dynamic is. If you did communicate in this way all the time, it might be a little bit confusing and might lead to misunderstandings and miscommunication. However, we do need to understand it because it does come up. And I think there are two key reasons why we need to talk about this topic today in Wednesday Words. First of all, you want to be able to understand it clearly. You want to understand the real intended meaning behind the words that people are using, particularly if they are using this style of language, which might not be clear to you. The other key reason is that you have the choice to use this type of language yourself and to use it in situations where you want to be slightly more indirect and more diplomatic in your communication approach. But it is a choice, always is. So let's get into today's Wednesday Words and learn these key techniques. And I'll give you some examples as well for you to understand how it comes to life. And we're going to start with number one, appearances. So in the situation where there is this bad news, there is a problem, appearances can be quite helpful because we are being not absolute. We are using the passive voice and we use phrases such as it seems or it appears or there seems to be a problem, for example. And this can be a soft approach to sharing the bad news, the negative points. From appearances, we might then use conditionals. So the conditional tense, as in most languages, is used as a way to express maybe a question or a lack of certainty. So in the example of the problem, I might say, well, there could be a problem, or there might be some issues or some challenges coming up. So the words you're using are words like may, might, could, would, and this softens the impact of what you're trying to communicate. So from conditionals, I'm now going to talk about the double negative. Now, this is perhaps the one which is most confusing of all for people, because what is happening is the negative message is hidden, if you like, inside the verb. So rather than saying, there is, this will be late. We might say something like, oh, it's not going to be on time. You can see what I'm doing there. Or maybe rather than saying, oh, this is expensive, I might say something like, it's not very good value. So we hide the negative message inside the verb, and then you end with a more positive adjective or noun or verb, which basically kind of softens the impact of the negative message. So you have to do some decoding there to work out what's really going on. From there, let's talk about modifying. Now, modifying adjectives means using a short phrase like fairly, a bit, a little, quite. And what that's doing is softening the impact of the adjective that comes next. So if I say something is a little late, I might mean actually it is very late. Or if I say something is a bit expensive, I might actually mean, that's actually something that's too expensive or not within my budget. So you see what's happening there. We soften the impact through these modifying phrases in front of the adjective. And then the final area of this softening diplomatic communication approach is the word sorry. Now, this is a huge topic in itself, and I think I've touched briefly on sorry before in some of the previous episodes of Wednesday Words. But sorry is a fascinating word because in English, it can, of course, be an apology. When we've done something wrong, we're apologizing for what's happened. But at the same time, it doesn't have to mean this. And in the context of diplomatic communication, sorry, I put in inverted commas like this because it's not really an apology. It's what I call a linguistic flag. It's effectively acting as introductory phrase to say, here comes the bad news, or here is something that is not going to be what you want to hear. So an example of this might be, sorry, I'm not sure I agree with you. Similar phrase is I'm afraid. I'm afraid it's not that simple. We can't do that. So watch out for these kind of types of phrases that the person isn't necessarily apologizing to you. They are actually flagging that they're going to share some bad news with you. So there you go, a little bit of an introduction to this topic of diplomatic and softening communication approach. I do hope that's useful to you. And as I say, I think there are two key points for you to take away today. One is for you to understand it in context so that when you experience it, when you hear that style of communication, you can really interpret what's going on. What is the actual message this person is trying to share with you? And really perhaps translate it into a more direct message that you can understand. The other activation that we can do is actually start to use this type of language ourselves. I think the main thing here is that we want to be skillful in doing this. We don't want to be using it all the time, otherwise we may cause confusion and misunderstanding, but we may choose to actively use it in specific situations where the situation and context would help that, or it means that the relationship means that it's important for us to use this to keep and maintain the relationship. Any questions on today's topic about diplomatic communication or more broadly about communication in this space? Then please do drop me a line. I always love to hear your questions, your comments, and find out what you found particularly useful. So please do feel free to contact me. And thank you so much for joining me for today's Wednesday Words, all about diplomatic communication. I'm Victoria Reynoldson, communication and culture coach, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Wednesday Words.